Asteroid Lilith, 1181, in the 8th house, the alchemy of shadow and sovereignty. The placement of Asteroid Lilith in the 8th house of a natal chart represents a profound intersection between primal instinct, personal sovereignty, and the domain of deep psychological transformation. While Black Moon Lilith, the calculated lunar apogee, often manifests as a raw, instinctual shadow that is projected onto us by the outside world, Asteroid Lilith brings a grounded, integrated, and more conscious dimension to these dynamics. It reveals where we attempt to maintain control over our hidden depths, where we experience taboos, and how we navigate the turbulent waters of intimacy, shared resources, and psychological rebirth. The 8th house archetype. The 8th house is traditionally associated with the mysteries of life, death, rebirth, regeneration, and the resources we share with others. It rules over deep psychological probing, taboo subjects, sexuality, psychological shadows, and the intangible realms of power and control. When the wild, untamed, and non-conformist energy of Asteroid Lilith enters this house, it introduces an inherent tension. The native's Lilithian nature, which craves freedom, autonomy, and the right to exist without societal conditioning, is forced to grapple with the heavy, shared, and sometimes suffocating energies of the 8th house. This creates an environment where the desire to be entirely self-governing clashes directly with the vulnerability required for emotional and financial entanglements with others. Navigating taboo and sexuality. One of the most defining manifestations of this placement is a complex relationship with sexuality and desire. Asteroid Lilith in the 8th house suggests that the native holds a powerful, magnetic, and perhaps unconventional approach to intimacy. The individual may feel a strong pull toward taboos, refusing to adhere to traditional moral scripts regarding sexual expression. However, they may simultaneously experience a deep-seated fear of being consumed, manipulated, or overpowered by a partner's energy. The Lilith in the 8th house individual desires a union of absolute equality and depth, yet the instinctual fear of vulnerability often leads to protective walls. Because the 8th house is linked to power dynamics, the native may discover that their personal power is tested whenever they attempt to merge their life with another. They are challenged to accept their raw passions without shame and to liberate themselves from the fear of being judged for what they desire behind closed doors. The psychology of power and control. At its core, the 8th house is about the redistribution of power. With Asteroid Lilith here, there is often a hypersensitivity to being controlled, manipulated, or financially dependent on others. The native may exhibit a strong drive for financial autonomy or, conversely, may attempt to control shared resources as a defense mechanism against being rendered powerless. This placement brings an acute, almost psychic ability to read the unspoken motives of others. The individual can intuitively sense the hidden shadows and repressed emotions in people and situations. While this can make them excellent psychologists, researchers, or guides through the underworld of the human psyche, it can also lead to hypervigilance. They may anticipate betrayal or abandonment, sometimes withdrawing into silence or engaging in power struggles to test the loyalty and depth of their connections. The path to transformation and alchemy. The journey of Asteroid Lilith in the 8th house is ultimately one of alchemy and integration. To navigate this placement successfully, the native must be willing to undergo a symbolic death and rebirth, a process central to 8th house growth. This involves confronting their deepest fears, including the fear of rejection, loss, and social ostracization. Reclaiming the Lilith archetype in this house means acknowledging the inner witch, the shadow self, and the instinctual intelligence that society often deems too dark or intense. By stepping into their true psychological sovereignty, the individual learns that they do not need to compromise their authenticity to be loved or to share their life with others. When integrated properly, this placement endows the native with tremendous emotional resilience, the capacity for profound spiritual healing, and the ability to guide others through their darkest transformations. Asteroid Lilith, 1181, transiting the 8th house, the alchemy of power, shadow, and rebirth. The transit of Asteroid Lilith through the 8th house marks a period of deep psychological excavation, boundary testing, and personal reclamation. In astrology, Asteroid Lilith represents the integration of our rawest passions, repressed desires, and the right to stand sovereign in our individual truth without seeking outside validation. When this energy moves through the 8th house, the domain of shared resources, intimacy, taboos, and psychological transformation, the cosmic climate invites you to confront your deepest shadows and reclaim your personal power. The mechanics of the transit. Asteroid Lilith takes approximately 4 years and 4 months to complete its orbit around the Sun, meaning it spends roughly 4 to 5 months transiting any single house in your natal chart, depending on retrograde motion. During an 8th house transit, Lilith acts as an internal truth teller. While traditional outer planet transits in the 8th house, such as Pluto, bring heavy, fated transformations, Asteroid Lilith brings an instinctual, sharp, and highly conscious awareness of where you have given your power away to others or where you hide your true nature out of fear of judgment. It is an invitation to look directly into the unconscious drives that govern your most intense emotional and financial entanglements. Confronting intimacy and taboos. One of the primary manifestations of this transit is the disruption of established dynamics within close, intimate relationships. The 8th house governs merging, vulnerability, and sexuality. During this transit, Asteroid Lilith brings your rawest desires and unconventional inclinations to the surface, making it difficult to maintain a polite or socially conditioned facade with a partner. You may find yourself drawn to exploring taboos or pushing the boundaries of what is considered acceptable in your private life. However, this transit can also stir up deep-seated fears of being consumed, manipulated, or overpowered. If you have historically compromised your own needs to maintain harmony or to appease a partner's financial or emotional expectations, Lilith's transit will highlight these imbalances. It forces a reckoning with how much of your authentic self you sacrifice in the name of connection, encouraging you to reclaim your autonomy within shared bonds. The psychology of shared resources and control. Because the 8th house rules over shared resources, taxes, inheritances, and joint finances, a Lilith transit can trigger significant power struggles regarding these domains. You may feel a sudden urge to break free from financial dependence on a partner, institution, or family member. Alternatively, you may notice others attempting to assert control over your assets, which will trigger a swift, instinctual boundary-setting response. This transit brings a heightened intuition, allowing you to read the hidden, unspoken motives of others with startling clarity. You are challenged to confront your own relationship with power and control, moving away from manipulative, defensive behaviors and toward transparent, unapologetic self-assertion. The alchemy of shadow and sovereignty. The ultimate purpose of this transit is transformation, the symbolic death and rebirth of your personal authority. Lilith acts as a psychopomp, guiding you through the underworld of your own psyche to recover parts of yourself that you have suppressed or demonized. As Asteroid Lilith moves through the 8th house, you are asked to integrate the shadow, acknowledge the parts of yourself that society may label too intense or unreasonable, recognizing them as sources of inner strength. Release shame, let go of the shame associated with your desires, vulnerabilities, and instincts. Establish true sovereignty, stand firm in your personal boundaries, refusing to be compromised by the expectations or demands of others. Subscribe, like, and share.